They call it Taiwan's 72 hours, the war scenario that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. It isn't the image of missiles falling or troops storming beaches that haunts them. It's the silence that comes before the noise. In the Pacific night, radar screens dim one by one, communication lines stutter, and then for a few terrifying moments, the island that powers the world simply disappears from the grid. In that instant, everything that modern civilization depends on, chips, data, logistics, trust, begins to shake. The first 72 hours of a Chinese strike on Taiwan would not look like the wars Americans remember from old footage. There would be no clear declaration, no marching armies, no broadcast of intent. It would begin as a whisper, a quiet realignment of electrons and data streams, a flicker across satellites and servers. And yet, within 3 days, the shockwave could reset global power itself. For years, Beijing has rehearsed this opening act in plain sight. Its military exercises, once framed as defensive drills, now trace the geometry of blockade and isolation. Every few months, the People's Liberation Army surrounds the island in overlapping zones of control, mock quarantines that stop short of combat but map out exactly how a real siege would look. In May 2024, joint sword exercises pressed closer than ever, sending warships through Taiwan's air defense zones and aircraft across the median line, an invisible boundary that once acted as a safety valve for peace. Each drill blurs the line between practice and reality. Each test desensitizes the world a little more to what an invasion might look like. And all of it, every maneuver, every incursion, every propaganda broadcast builds a single message: that China is prepared to act fast, to act decisively, and to act before the world can agree how to respond. The island itself, though small, stands at the center of global technology. It produces 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors, the chips that drive smartphones, satellites, and supercomputers. The machines you're using to watch this right now, their processors almost certainly trace back to Taiwan. Which means that if those fabrication plants or fabs go dark even for a week, the shockwave wouldn't stay regional. It would cascade into every economy, every industry, every defense network that runs on silicon logic. The first domino wouldn't fall in a trench, it would fall in a clean room. Pentagon war games run by think tanks like CSIS show that Beijing wouldn't need to land troops to cripple the island. A coordinated hybrid strike, precision missiles, cyber warfare, undersea cable sabotage, and maritime blockade could paralyze Taiwan in less than 72 hours. The goal wouldn't be conquest, it would be compliance, to show the world that China could take control without ever officially declaring war, to prove that the new era of conflict doesn't need tanks, it needs timing. Hour zero begins in silence. Before sunrise, Chinese drones cross the strait at low altitude, mapping radar positions, seeking weak points. Within minutes, long-range missiles and hypersonic glide vehicles target air defense sites, radar arrays, and key communication hubs. Explosions bloom across mountain ridges and coastal airfields. Taiwan's fighter jets scramble, but the first wave isn't meant to destroy, it's meant to blind. As radar coverage collapses, Beijing's electronic warfare units jam satellite uplinks, flood networks with decoy traffic, and inject false data into GPS systems. The goal is confusion. No one, not Taipei, not Washington, not Tokyo, can tell how big the attack really is. By hour 2, the blockade begins. The Chinese Navy declares security zones around Taiwan's ports, claiming they are for live fire exercises. Civilian vessels, many of them maritime militia ships, flood the approaches to Kaohsiung and Keelung, blocking traffic under the guise of fishing. Insurance companies cancel routes. Commercial captains hesitate. The flow of energy, goods, and food slows to a trickle. At sea, it looks like a swarm of innocuous boats, but together they are a wall that moves without raising a flag of war. Hour 6 brings the first digital collapse. Internet traffic reroutes through servers in Hong Kong and mainland China, strangling data speed. Undersea cables, two of which were physically cut in 2023 near the Matsum Islands, flicker offline again. On social media, fake evacuation orders spread, followed by deep-fake videos of Taiwanese leaders calling for surrender. Television signals are hijacked. Panic begins to mix with disbelief. When the lights go out, people don't think of war. They think of blackout. And that confusion is the point.
Hour 12. U.S. satellites confirm what the Pentagon has feared for decades: a synchronized assault built on timing, not territory. Carrier groups are ordered to reposition, but the Pacific is vast. The closest strike groups are days away. Japan raises alert levels. Australia moves reconnaissance flights north, and markets from Tokyo to New York begin to shake. In Washington, National Security Council meetings stretch into the night. Every option is bad. To act now risks open war. To wait risks losing deterrence entirely. And the clock keeps ticking. By hour 24, the physical strain starts to show. Taiwan's power grid, already running on imported fuel, begins rolling blackouts as supply lines choke. LNG tankers turn away, unwilling to breach the safety zone. Hospitals switch to generators. Factories, including the crown jewels of TSMC's chip production, reduce output to essential lines only. Somewhere in a clean room near Hsinchu, an engineer stares at a silent console, realizing that every minute offline is another fracture in the global economy. At hour 36, the information war peaks. Taiwanese networks are hit by the largest DDoS assault in history. Every ministry, every bank, every news outlet sees login attempts surge beyond human comprehension. Phones go dead. Broadcasts loop old footage. Even government statements are met with doubt, because no one can tell what's real. This isn't chaos for its own sake. It's engineered paralysis. China's strategy has always been built on ambiguity. Stay below the threshold of attack while still breaking the target's will. Hour 48. The chip choke. With electricity rationed and transport frozen, the world's tech giants scramble to reroute orders. Apple, Nvidia, and defense contractors issue quiet warnings. Within days, production will stall. Stock markets slide. Oil futures spike. Cryptocurrencies surge, then crash. The ripple spreads faster than any missile. This is the first war in which markets feel the shock before soldiers do. At hour 60, the blockade becomes law. Beijing announces a customs quarantine to inspect all vessels for safety. The legal language is pure theater, but it works. Major maritime insurers refuse coverage. Major shipping firms divert routes. Taiwan's harbors stand empty. On global TV, anchors argue whether this is war or policy. That question itself buys China time. Every minute the world debates semantics, the ring around the island hardens. Hour 72. The silence returns. No declaration, no surrender. Just an island surrounded, half-powered, half online, holding its breath while the rest of the world wonders what to call it. And that's when the real battle begins, not in the Taiwan Strait, but in the minds of those watching from afar. Because this isn't just about Taiwan, it's about the future of deterrence. The Cold War was built on mutual survival, the idea that nuclear fire made total war impossible. But the new era is about mutual dependence and the ability to weaponize it. The tools are different: semiconductors instead of missiles, data cables instead of borders, shipping lanes instead of tanks. The principle is the same: control the choke points and you control the world. For the United States, the nightmare isn't defeat, it's exhaustion. The Pentagon has the hardware to fight on multiple fronts, but not the focus, not the political unity, not the public tolerance. Beijing knows this. Its strategy is to stretch Washington thin, to make every crisis feel connected. Ukraine, Gaza, the Red Sea, the South China Sea. Each one drains attention. Each one shortens patience. And when America hesitates, others watch and adjust. In Europe, leaders debate sanctions and statements. In Tokyo, planners weigh whether defending Taiwan means inviting missiles toward their own ports. In Seoul, the question isn't loyalty, it's survival. Across Asia, nations that once saw the U.S. as anchor now see it as question mark. That doubt is as powerful as any weapon. And yet, Taiwan is not helpless. The island has spent years preparing, dispersing assets, hardening communications, stockpiling fuel, and training civilians for the unthinkable. Their doctrine has evolved from porcupine to something leaner, meaner, more mobile. Hit fast, hide faster. Move every hour. Deception becomes survival. Some call it the honey badger strategy. Small, fierce, impossible to corner. And if it works, those 72 hours might not end in collapse, but in stalemate, a pause long enough for the world to wake up. Still, every wargame ends the same way. Enormous loss on all sides, tens of thousands of casualties, ships burning, satellites falling, global trade frozen, and all of it over a stretch of water barely 100 miles wide. The Taiwan Strait, once a trade artery, becomes the world's most dangerous fault line.
This is what the Pentagon fears, not just the loss of an ally, but the loss of predictability itself. Because if the old rules of deterrence no longer apply, then every crisis becomes a coin toss. Will Beijing stop at quarantine? Will Washington intervene? Will markets panic? No one knows, and that uncertainty becomes the weapon. Economically, the ripple would reach American homes faster than any bomb. Prices climb, tech shortages spread, energy markets convulse. And then comes the psychological shift, the realization that the U.S. no longer controls the rhythm of the world. When the dollar shakes, when the chips stop, when the screen you hold in your hand no longer works, power stops being invisible. You start to feel its absence. In Beijing, this scenario is called deterrence through fait accompli. Win before the other side can define the fight. It's not about destruction. It's about paralysis. A war without a battlefield, fought through logistics, finance, and fear. And that's what makes it so dangerous. But in that danger lies the lesson. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's clarity. Every society that depends on faraway supply chains, on fragile technology, on invisible data flows, has to ask the same question: what happens when the signal dies? For Taiwan, that answer has been survival training, redundancy, resilience. For everyone else, it's understanding. Because awareness, not firepower, is what buys time. The truth is, the first 72 hours wouldn't decide just one war. They would decide the future shape of power itself, whether the 21st century remains connected or collapses into blocks, whether nations choose cooperation or control, whether innovation continues or gets rationed by politics. And yet, beneath all the numbers, all the strategies, there's something deeply human. In every war game, every simulation, there are always moments. An engineer who keeps a generator running, a pilot who stays in the sky, a coder who reboots a block network by hand. Small choices that hold the line between chaos and endurance. Those choices don't make headlines, but they make history. Maybe that's the real message buried inside the Pentagon's fear. It isn't just about missiles or chips or alliances. It's about humanity's dependence on systems it doesn't understand, and the reminder that strength isn't about domination, but about endurance. The nations that survive the next crisis won't be the ones with the loudest threats, but the ones that keep their heads when the lights go out. The clock is ticking, and somewhere in the Pacific, drills continue, data flows, and decisions are rehearsed. The question isn't if it happens, it's how prepared we'll be when it does. Stay alert, stay informed, and remember, preparation isn't fear, it's foresight. Subscribe to The Survival Brief, where we turn chaos into clarity. Because in a world this fragile, understanding is your strongest defense.